I still check the water before I enter. Not the temperature, not the depth, the surface itself. I look for the reflection of the sky, the way light fractures on waves, the moment before immersion when you can still see both worlds at once. My son thinks it's a game. Mama looks. He laughs, splashing. I smile. I don't explain that some lessons don't leave your body, that the woman who taught me to fear the water also taught me I could survive it, that the deepest darkness holds both the hand that pushes and the strength to swim back up. My mother-in-law taught me that luxury is violence with good lighting, that a yacht is just a prison that moves, that champagne can be poisoned with a smile, that the woman who offers you her arm on a stormy deck is calculating the angle of your fall. She taught me these lessons not with words, but with physics, with the precise application of force, with the cold mathematics of inheritance, with the understanding that some grandmothers would rather drown their grandchildren than share their sons. But she also taught me something else, that survival is visibility, that the woman presumed dead has power the living cannot imagine, that walking back onto the deck where you were pushed is the ultimate reclamation. My name is Valentina. I'm 35 years old, and this is the story of how my mother-in-law pushed me overboard, how I swam through darkness pregnant and alone, and how I walked back onto her yacht a year later with my son in my arms and her destruction in my hands. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, this is where we tell the truth about families that drown their daughters-in-law and call it accident. If you've ever had someone smile while they measured your worth in bloodlines, if you've ever been thrown into darkness and learned to find the surface, subscribe. We have stories for you every week, and we read every comment. Here's my story. I met Lucas at a gallery opening in Buenos Aires. I was 27, an art restorer, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic, educated on scholarships and stubbornness. He was 30, beautiful, lost in the way of men who have always had enough money to avoid knowing themselves. His mother, Doña Beatriz, was 55 then, surgically preserved, smiling with the warmth of a glacier. She hated me immediately. Not because I was poor, I wasn't. Not really, just ordinary. She hated me because I was real. Because Lucas looked at me with something she recognized but couldn't manufacture. Desire that wasn't about inheritance, attention that wasn't about control, love that grew from conversation rather than arrangement. Valentina, she said at our first dinner, rolling the name like she was tasting wine she didn't plan to buy. Such a passionate name, for such a practical girl. I was practical. I had to be. My father fixed engines, my mother graded papers until midnight. I put myself through university restoring paintings, working with hands that understood patience, that knew how to remove centuries of grime without damaging what lay beneath. I was not glamorous. I was not connected. I was not the heiress Beatriz had selected for her son since his birth. But Lucas chose me, or rather, he chose against her, a rebellion disguised as romance. A declaration of independence that he didn't fully understand would cost him everything he knew. We married in 3 years. Small ceremony, my mother's choice, paid for with our savings. Beatriz offered to organize something appropriate, a cathedral, 500 guests, the society pages, and was furious when we refused. She attended in black, for mourning, she told guests, the death of my son's judgment. The marriage was happy in the ways that don't matter to women like Beatriz. We talked until 3 a.m. We made love with the lights on. We planned a future that didn't include her, a small apartment, my restoration work, his eventual escape from the family steel business into something that mattered. We were, in retrospect, children playing at independence while the glacier smiled and calculated. Beatriz's warfare was elegant. She didn't shout. She didn't forbid, she simply existed. At every corner, every restaurant, she'd be at the next table. Every vacation, she'd coincidentally book the same resort. Every gift, she'd improve upon my thoughtful book replaced with his real present, a watch that cost more than my annual salary. She planted stories in magazines. Sources close to the family describing Valentina's ambition, her social climbing, her suspicious friendships with male colleagues. She sent Lucas concerned messages about my spending habits, habits that didn't exist, that she invented, that became real through repetition. She invited his ex-girlfriends to dinner, old friends who just happened to be available, just happened to be aristocratic, just happened to mention how worried they were about Lucas's choices. Lucas defended me. Weekly, intermittently, always followed by private conversations with his mother where she cried, apologized, only wanted his happiness, and emerged with new ammunition. He was not a bad man. He was a trapped one caught between love and guilt, between the woman he chose and the woman who had controlled his narrative since birth. I endured. I told myself that love conquered, that patience won, that eventually Beatriz would accept me or die or simply lose interest. I told myself these things while she commented on my weight, my clothes, my inability to conceive, a failure that was somehow mine despite Lucas's own medical issues, which she refused to acknowledge. Then the pregnancy. I found out at 3 months. Lucas and I had stopped trying. The pressure, the comments, the monthly devastation had eroded our intimacy until conception seemed impossible. But bodies surprise you. Mine did, at least. I didn't tell Lucas immediately. Something stopped me, instinct perhaps, the animal sense that danger gathers before storms. I told my mother, who cried and celebrated and made me promise to rest. I told no one else. Beatriz found out anyway. I don't know how. Lucas's doctor, a friend of the family, the pharmacy where I bought prenatal vitamins, some network of informants that operated like intelligence service. She knew before I told Lucas, which meant she knew before I was ready to protect what I carried. The reconciliation cruise was her idea. 2 weeks in the Caribbean, the family's megayacht, time to bond as family before the baby arrives. She was transformed, warm, generous, finally accepting, Lucas said, tears in his eyes. She's coming around, Val, she wants to be part of this. I didn't believe her, but I wanted to, desperately. For Lucas, who needed this fantasy. For myself, exhausted by warfare. For the child growing inside me who deserved grandparents' family, the illusion of belonging. We boarded in Miami. The yacht was obscene, 300 feet, crew of 40, helipad, submarine, everything excess could buy. Beatriz greeted us at the gangway, embracing Lucas, then me, her hands lingering on my shoulders with a pressure that felt like measurement. Welcome, darling, she said, her smile reaching her eyes for the first time ever. Let's make memories. The first week was Cold War. Beatriz organized activities that excluded me, old family traditions that Lucas couldn't refuse without causing scenes. She commented on my pregnancy constantly, my weight gain so much so early. Are you sure it's not twins? My diet no pate, but it's the only source of iron that matters. My fatigue pregnancy is natural, dear, not an illness. She invited guests, old friends who were her allies who looked at me with the evaluation of livestock. But she didn't push, not obviously. She waited, patient as ice, for the moment she had calculated. It came on the 9th night. A storm, not hurricane, but strong, the yacht rocking, rain horizontal. The crew occupied with securing everything that could fly away. I was nauseous, the pregnancy making me seasick in ways I hadn't experienced before. I went to the aft deck for air, for the cold spray that sometimes settled my stomach. Beatriz appeared, silk robe, perfectly dry as if the storm avoided her. She carried 2 champagne flutes. For your nerves, darling, she said, offering one. The doctor said small amounts are fine. And you look so pale. I didn't take it. I'm okay, just need air. She stepped closer. Close enough that I smelled her perfume, something expensive and sharp, nothing like the warmth I associated with motherhood. Close enough that her hand found my shoulder, supposedly steadying me against the yacht's roll. You know, she said, conversational, almost kind, I had Lucas's room prepared as a nursery. The east suite with the balcony, he loved it as a child. I thought perhaps the baby could spend summers there. Without you. Of course, you'd want to continue your work. I'll raise my own child, I said, stepping back. Will you? Her grip tightened. With what? Your restoration salary. Lucas's allowance, which I control. You're a guest in this family, Valentina. A temporary condition. And conditions pass. I turned to leave. Her hand moved, not a push exactly, but a release, a removal of support at the precise moment the yacht rolled. Physics, as I said, mathematics. The angle of fall calculated by a woman who had never done anything impulsive in her life. I went over the railing. The cold was absolute. The darkness total. I surfaced, gasping, and saw the yacht's lights receding. Heard Beatriz's voice carrying on the wind. She fell. I tried to save her. Help someone, she fell. They didn't stop. The yacht turned slowly, searchlights sweeping, but the storm made visibility impossible, the waves too high, the darkness too complete. I saw Lucas on deck, screaming, being held back by crew members. I saw Beatriz, wrapped in a blanket, being comforted, then I saw nothing. The current took me, the cold took me, and I was alone with the sea and my unborn child and the understanding that I had been erased. I don't know how long I swam. Hours, probably. The cold should have killed me, hypothermia, drowning, the million ways the sea claims those it swallows. But I found a fishing buoy, something abandoned, covered in barnacles, and I clung. I held my belly with one hand, whispering to the child inside, "Stay, please stay, I will get us back, I promise." I lost consciousness. When I woke, I was in a clinic on a small island, Dominican Republic. I later learned, though I didn't know where I was. A fishing boat had found me at dawn, the crew barely speaking Spanish, communicating through gestures and urgency. They thought I was dead. When they realized I wasn't, they brought me to the only medical facility they knew. The baby was alive. That was the first thing the doctor told me through a translator, her face creased with the exhaustion of limited resources. El bebé está vivo. Pero usted necesita descanso. Mucho descanso. I rested, I healed. I watched the news on a small television in the clinic's waiting room, the only one with satellite. I saw myself, Valentina Vasquez, presumed dead after tragic accident on family yacht. I saw the funeral, elegant, tearful Beatriz in black pearls accepting condolences. I saw Lucas, destroyed, being guided by his mother through the rituals of grief. I saw Beatriz, 3 weeks after my death, introducing Lucas to a family friend at a charity gala. Isabella Montenegro, 26, old money. The heiress Beatriz had always wanted. The replacement, already selected, already presented, already being positioned. I understood then. This was not about me. It never had been. I was an obstacle, a temporary condition, something to be removed when convenient. Beatriz had done this before, would do it again. Until Lucas produced the heir she wanted, raised by the woman she chose in the world she controlled. I should have called, should have revealed myself, should have exploded her narrative with the simple fact of my survival. But I was weak, injured, pregnant in a foreign country with no resources. And something else, something harder, colder, more patient. I wanted her to finish, to commit fully to the lie, to the replacement, to the future she was building on my absence. I wanted her invested, exposed, vulnerable in her certainty that I was gone. I wanted to walk back onto her deck alive. The pregnancy was difficult. High risk, the doctors said, because of the trauma, the cold, the stress. I stayed in the Dominican Republic, hidden, supported by the fishing family who had found me, the Garcias, who asked no questions, who protected me because that was their nature, who refused payment because la vida no se vende. I gave birth to Mateo in a small hospital, 7 months after my fall. He was perfect. Dark hair, Lucas's eyes, my chin. Alive against all odds, against the cold and the darkness and the woman who had tried to drown him before he could compete for his father's attention. But I didn't just survive. I prepared. I contacted my cousin, Camilla, in Miami. She worked in offshore finance, legitimate, but with knowledge of the shadows where Beatriz's family moved their money. I asked her to investigate. She found what I needed, Beatriz's pattern. Lucas's first girlfriend, university, drowned in a sailing accident 10 years before me. The second, an actress, fell from a balcony in Greece. Both before children could be conceived. Both leaving Lucas devastated, controlled, returned to his mother's orbit. Both accidents that benefited Beatriz's plans, that removed obstacles, that maintained her monopoly on her son's future. I found more. The crew member who had tried to save me paid $50,000 through a shell company 3 days after my disappearance. The doctor who had examined Lucas's fertility issues suddenly retired to a villa in Uruguay, his silence purchased. The pattern of payments, cover-ups, the machinery of a woman who treated murder as estate planning. I documented everything. Not for police, the Caribbean authorities were susceptible to influence, and Beatriz's money reached further than justice. For something else. For the moment when revelation would be most devastating, when her own world would turn on her, when the society she cultivated would become the jury she couldn't control. I also prepared physically. Learned to pilot yachts, small ones first, then larger. Got certified in diving, in navigation, in the skills that would let me move in Beatriz's world without needing her approval. Changed my appearance, hair, skin tone, the subtle alterations that made me visible but unrecognizable. And I became Sophia Reyes, dive instructor at a luxury resort in St. Bart's. A woman with no past, no connections, no threat to anyone. Just another service worker in the machine that kept the wealthy entertained. I waited. 1 year, the anniversary of my death. Beatriz organized another cruise. The same yacht, renamed New Beginnings, obscenely. A celebration of life continuing, of Lucas's recovery, of his engagement to Isabella Montenegro. 200 guests, the Buenos Aires elite, politicians, press, the entire architecture of Beatriz's power gathered to bless the future she had manufactured. I infiltrated as crew. Not difficult, the yacht industry runs on invisible labor, on people who serve without being seen, who know their place and stay in it. I was a waitress, a server, a woman in uniform who poured champagne and disappeared into background. I watched them. Beatriz, radiant, orchestrating. Lucas, thinner, paler, with eyes that searched every room as if looking for something he couldn't name. Isabella, beautiful, uncomfortable, sensing she was a prop but not understanding the play. The gala dinner. Black tie, crystal, the deck transformed into a floating palace. I served the first course, the second, pouring wine, clearing plates, invisible as furniture. Beatriz didn't look at me. No one looked at me. That was the point. Then dessert, a presentation of tropical fruits elaborate the kind of ostentation that substitutes for meaning. I carried the platter to the head table myself, set it before Beatriz with the precision of a servant who knows her place. On top, a folded card. She opened it automatically, expecting another congratulation, another tribute to her hosting. It was an ultrasound. Mateo, dated, named, alive. With a note, your grandson, the one you tried to drown. He swims better than you. She looked up, really looked, and saw past the uniform, past the hair, past the year of transformation, my eyes. The same eyes she had watched disappear into darkness. The same eyes that had clung to a fishing buoy while she told the world I was dead. Hello, Sugra, I said, loud enough for the table to hear, loud enough for the silence to spread. Thank you for the party. I thought it was time to formally introduce your grandson. The chaos was immediate. Lucas, standing, knocking his chair, his face cycling through impossible emotions, grief, joy, confusion, horror. Isabella, frozen, understanding suddenly that she was a placeholder in a drama she hadn't auditioned for. Guests, whispering, reaching for phones, for context, for the story that would dominate tomorrow's society pages. But I wasn't finished. I distributed folders to every table, every journalist, every politician. Hundreds of pages, compiled over a year, translated, notarized, undeniable. The pattern of deaths, Lucas's girlfriends, the accidents, the payments, the crew members' bank records, the retired doctor's villa purchase, the shell companies, the cover-ups, the machinery of a woman who murdered for control. This is not vengeance, I said, my voice carrying across the deck, over the water where I had nearly died. This is family introduction. I thought you should meet your grandson before the police meet you. Beatriz tried to stand, tried to speak. But her world was collapsing, the guests reading, the journalists recording, the authorities she had cultivated now seeing her as liability rather than asset. She reached for Lucas, for support, for the son she had controlled for 30 years. He stepped back, looked at her, really looked, and saw what I had seen, the glacier, the calculation, the willingness to drown his loves to maintain her grip. Mother, he said, the word a question, an accusation, a final understanding. She had no answer. For the first time, Beatriz was silent. She was arrested in port. Not by local authorities, she had bought them, but by Interpol, alerted by Camilla's financial investigation, by the pattern that crossed jurisdictions, by the international nature of her crimes. The trial would take years, the appeals, the delays that money purchases, but the narrative was set. The society that had protected her now excluded her. The power that she had wielded became evidence of her guilt. Lucas asked to see me. I refused at first. Then accepted on terms, public place, supervised with Mateo present but protected. He was destroyed, not by grief, by comprehension. The understanding that his mother had killed, that his loves had been murdered, that his life had been managed like a portfolio with obstacles removed and investments curated. I'm sorry, he said, tears streaming. I didn't know, I didn't want to know. I let her, you let her, I agreed, because loving you cost too much, because your weakness was her weapon, because I swam through darkness pregnant while you accepted condolences. I love you, he said, I always have. Love is not enough, I replied, holding Mateo closer. Love without courage is just another form of control, and I will not let my son be controlled by you or by her memory. I didn't forbid him access, but I set terms, therapy, supervision, the understanding that paternity is presence rather than possession, that recovery is earned rather than inherited. He agreed, desperately, pathetically. I didn't trust him, but I didn't need to. Mateo's protection was my responsibility, not his. I used the inheritance, Mateo's share of the frozen family trust, eventually released by courts, to create La Boya, the Buoy, an organization that rescues women from familial control, from economic violence, from the elegant traps of wealthy families where abuse is managed rather than acknowledged. We operate in 6 countries now. Yacht workers, domestic staff, the invisible labor that serves the wealthy, we train them to recognize patterns, to document evidence, to understand that the gold handcuffs are still handcuffs. We provide legal support, financial independence, the resources to escape when escape seems impossible. I still dive, still pilot small boats, still check the water before I enter, looking for the reflection of both worlds, the surface and the depth, the light and the darkness, the hand that pushes and the strength that swims back. Mateo is 2 now. He loves the water, fearless, laughing, splashing in ways that make my heart stop and start. I teach him to float, to breathe, to trust his own buoyancy. I teach him that the sea is not enemy, that darkness is not danger, that the woman who survives drowning learns to swim deeper than those who never fell. Sometimes we see Lucas. He is better, slowly in therapy, learning to be a father rather than a son. I don't know if we will ever be together. I don't know if I can forgive, or if forgiveness is even the right word for what happens when someone chooses their weakness over your life. But I know this. Beatriz sits in a prison that allows her silk robes and supervised visits and the illusion of dignity. She writes me letters I don't open. She asks about Mateo through lawyers I ignore. She has become what she always was, a woman alone, controlling nothing, whose power dissolved the moment someone she presumed dead learned to swim. I am Valentina. I am 35 years old. I have a son who loves water, an organization that saves women, and a habit of checking reflections before I dive that my friends find eccentric. I have a mother-in-law who tried to drown me and a husband who let her, and a life that proves you can walk back onto any deck if you're willing to swim through darkness first. The surface is not the story. The depth is. And I have learned to live in both. See you in the next story.